Hi everyone, Kathy Beltran with Sacred Dance with Trance. I am super excited and I will tell you a little bit nervous that I have fellow member Robert Goodwin, Trance Medium from the UK, here with us today, and so grateful to him to schedule this interview. Again, everybody, Robert Goodwin.
Thanks, Kathy. Hi, it's nice to be here and nice to be able to talk to yourself and anyone that's listening. I love these opportunities to talk about trance and to maybe clarify a few issues and put across some points. And if I can offer yourself and anyone who's listening the benefit of my 40 years plus experience as a trance medium, I'm happy to do that. So thanks for the opportunity.
Oh my goodness, thank you, thank you, thank you. I do want to mention in the beginning really quick is that I did post one of your books in the groups, but you actually have 8 different books out. And I think all these books can some be purchased on Amazon or just directly from your website?
Yeah, there's actually 6 white feather books, which are transcripts from public demonstrations that we've done over the years. A couple of those are now out of print, but the remainder, which are paperbacks, can be bought from the White Feather website, but all of them, I must emphasize, are now available to download from Amazon in electronic format. So that's a good thing. We've only been able to do that in the last 12 months. So they're all available.
Oh, that's perfect. And I know this website also that you have is whitefeather.org. Is that
whitefeather.org.uk.
Okay.
We've been running that website for about, how long? 25 years, something like that. So we get a lot of hits on it, really.
You do, and there's a lot of great information posted there. You have so much content available there.
Yeah, we're always adding to it. You know, we're updating it all the time, and it's the whole idea behind it is to put information out there, not just about trance, but a little bit of what I would call alternate, information, conspiracy theory, if you like to call it that. But it's all relevant, I think, to what's happening in the world today, and it's all part of our spiritual awareness and spiritual pathway, I feel.
Yes, no, I really love it because I can get lost in your website. I can just be reading and jumping. So it's a wonderful website. I'm so
That's great. Thank you.
Love that. I figured that we would start first because really, people want to know how you started on this path. What was the first thing? How did you get from here to here? I mean, and the work that you're doing is wonderful work. And so most people want to know how you started out with this.
Okay, well, most mediums I find in some way or other, and this might sound a slightly odd thing to start with, but most mediums in some way have some catalyst that brings them into the desire to want to develop, even if they're natural, even if they have gifts. Well, we've all got gifts that we're sort of born with and we bring in with us, but there's usually some catalyst, and I find that a lot of potential mediums have, shall I say, suffered in some way, either physically, mentally, emotionally, and sometimes a combination of all 3. And certainly in my case, as a young lad, I suffered a lot with my nerves. I used to be a worrier. I often say to people now, I worried for England. I was a born worrier and a hypochondriac with it. And that sort of carried on and continued into my teens. And it wasn't strange looking back, but a series of events happened that transformed my life and made me realize that I had a purpose in life and I'd actually come here to do this work. I'd always felt, even as a youngster, that I had a purpose in life, that I'd got to do something, that I'd come here for a reason. But I didn't really understand what that reason was. And when I was about 16, 17, my grandmother, who was a very spiritual lady, I was very close to her, had started writing to a spiritual healer because she herself was bedridden. She had been for many years. She'd only got half of one lung. She got heart trouble and she couldn't get out of bed. And she started writing to a spiritual healer. And by a series of, I won't call them coincidences because they're more than that, she was put in touch with another healer in Canada. Now, this guy, whose name was Colin Turner, he's now passed on, was in the Canadian police, mounted police. He was a policeman, but he also did spiritual healing, absent healing and contact healing. And it just so happened that he was over in this country on police business. And he said to my grandmother, I'll pop in and see you, give you some healing. My grandmother said to me, why don't you come round, Rob? Why don't you, because I only live round the corner, why don't you come round and let this guy give you some healing? Might be able to help you. And I said, no, I can't do that. You know, you'd probably look at me and say, you've only got 3 weeks to live or something like that. That's how my mind works, right? I got persuaded to go round to this meeting. This guy put his hands on my shoulders. He put me at ease straight away. He was a big guy, about 6'4", put his hands on my shoulders. He said, I'm going to give you some healing, Rob. I've never to this day had an experience like that. The power that came through him, I came out of my body. I felt as though I was rising up. My feet were rising up. I came out of my body. And that transformed me. I knew from that moment, that single moment, that there was something else other than this life. And it sort of confirmed what I'd sort of thought anyway, but didn't have any confirmation of. And one of the things I used to get was a particular pain in my chest that I thought was a heart attack waiting to happen. And I never, after that moment, I never had that feeling again. It just went. And I could still feel his hands on my shoulders 3 or 4 days after he left. He went back to Canada, and it was suggested that I write to him to keep the link going, which I did. And I used to tell him about how I used to meditate, you know, in the silence, and I used to get these feelings around me and all that. And to my astonishment, he wrote back and he said, Rob, he said, I've got something to tell you. He said, we've had a seance over here. We've had a meeting, he said, with spirit, and you are a medium. And I was aghast, you know, and he said, you need to develop this. You need to develop it. So I took on board what he said, and I started going to local spiritualist churches, and every week I would get a message from a different medium. It was embarrassing because they would always come to me and they say, you know, you've got this person with you, that person with you. But the big transformation, even bigger than having the healing from Colin, was that I went down, and this really put me on my pathway. I went down to a meeting in Hastings, which is on the south coast in the UK. I was 17 at the time, first time I'd been away from home. I saw this meeting. It was a weekend meeting for the Kent Healers Association, and I thought, oh, that's interesting. I'm interested in healing. I'll go down and, you know, I went down on the train, booked into this hotel. And Kathy, I felt so alone. I didn't know anyone. No one spoke to me. I thought, what on earth am I doing here? What am I doing here? Everyone got dressed up for dinner in their bow ties and the DJs. And I didn't even have a bow tie. I didn't have a DJ. I just had my jumper and shirt, and I sat on my own eating my dinner. This was about 7 o'clock, 7:30 in the evening. They were all chatting, you know. And I thought, this is a big mistake. You know, I shouldn't have come here. That evening I went to bed. I was in a front room on the hotel overlooking the seashore. Closed the curtains, heavy lined curtains, pulled them to. There was no light could get into that room at all. It was just a sink and a wardrobe and a bed. And I drifted off to sleep. Well, about 1 o'clock, I guess it was, in the morning, I was awakened by a light, which was the size of a football. And it was translucent blue white light. It wasn't solid. I could see parts of the way through it. And it was like a large orb, and it was floating above the bed, just above the foot of the bed. I turned the bedside lamp on, and I couldn't see it. It had disappeared. So I got out of bed, had a look through the windows, made sure the curtains were shut, got back into bed, turned the light off, and it was still there.
Wow.
If I'd have known then what I know now, I would have talked to it, because I know it was a spirit guide, a spirit helper, but I didn't. I wasn't afraid at all. I felt so peaceful, and I just went to sleep. I just turned over and went to sleep. Well, the following morning, when I went down to breakfast, it was like everything had changed. People were coming up to me. People I'd never met before were friendly. They shook my hand. They were talking to me. Went into breakfast, fine. Everything was fine. Went into the first lecture of the day, which was given by a famous healer called it was either Marjorie Wilson or Marie Wilson, who's now passed, but she was famous in her day. This is going back, by the way, to 1973, right? Before the lecture started, there was a little lady, an old lady, across the other side of the room who was staring at me intently. I was sitting on my own. She kept looking across at me, and I thought, she's going to come over and say something, and she did. She came over and sat down beside me, and she opened her purse and she said, I've got this, I've got to give you this, she said. And it was a piece of paper with handwritten words on it. And she said, I'm a physical medium. She said, I do automatic writing. And she said, last night, in the middle of the night, I was woken up by spirit and told that I had to write this message for you. So I reckon the guide that had come to my room had gone next door, because she was in the next room. I didn't know that. I reckon he'd gone next door and said, "Hi, wake up, you've got to give this young lad a message." And the message was, Spirit are so pleased that you've come here this weekend. You're meant to be here and you have work to do for Spirit. And it was signed not by White Feather, but by another guide that works with me. It was signed by that guide's name. And I kept that piece of paper for years and years. And it was that really started me on the pathway. And from there, I joined a development circle. I thought to develop healing, but it didn't go that way. And after a few weeks of sitting, I started to get all sorts of weird feelings. And that was the beginning of starting to develop trance.
Wow. I love hearing the stories that start somebody on their path, because it seems like everything was, guided, like everything was to happen. And the person got woken up the night before to deliver this message, to write this message for you, because you're feeling so awful the day before. And it must have been such a beautiful thing to, next thing you know, everything completely changed the next morning for you.
It was unbelievable. It was as though someone had flicked a switch. And by the end, it was only a weekend from Friday night to Sunday evening. By Sunday evening, it was time for me to go home. And I didn't want to go home because I'd made so many friends, and it's like I fitted in perfectly. It was quite remarkable, really. I've never it's stuck with me all these years, that weekend. I'll never forget it.
I think it's amazing. I mean, a lot of people can relate to like your earlier experiences, having anxiety or being a hypochondriac. Because I mean, when you were saying that, I was like, oh yeah, I remember sometimes being this way, and sometimes still to this day, I might do that as well. And I also think that Chris Ratter, I think in an interview and in his book, he mentioned that, he first started going out, sitting, thinking that he was going to develop to be a platform medium. And the spirit world had different plans. They knew exactly what was supposed to happen with you.
That's right.
And you found that out. Exactly
the same. As I say, I thought I was going to develop as a healer. I had no aspirations to work on the platform or in public. And I was as surprised as anyone when trance started to develop. I had previously, before joining the circle, when I used to sit in quiet meditation, my parents thought I was really weird because, like most of my mates and friends were going out, going to the pub or something, and I'd be sitting in the front room. We had a back room and a front parlour in the house, and I would sit there on my own in the dark, just playing music and just meditating. And I used to feel like I can only describe it as a warm blanket come over me. It was like someone had put a warm blanket over my head. But Kathy, it was met with so much love. It was love that was palpable. It used to bring me almost to tears. The love that came with it, and I knew there was someone standing there. I didn't know what to do with it. But when I joined the circle, the development group, obviously then it was more structured, and we had a very good circle leader who was a trance medium himself, and he was able to see the guides with me and sort of direct them and direct me as to what to do and how to develop. And I can only say, Kathy, that the feeling to speak, it didn't just happen, it grew in intensity over many months. And the 1 week, I could not contain it anymore. And I had to stand up, in actual fact. And this voice spoke through me, and it was not White Feather. It was a farmer. It was an Englishman, but it was a farmer. And he didn't come out with any great philosophy or teaching. He just spoke. And it was as though he was the, if you like, the catalyst to open the door, to use the voice box and to open the door for the guides to come through. He only said a few words, but it was such a relief, really, because I've been holding this back for weeks, pushing it down, and I couldn't, I just felt compelled. And once that had come through, once the door was open, then the real development with White Feather started. And I think all mediums worth their salt will tell you that it never ends. There's no such thing as a developed medium. You're always developing, you're always working. Even after 40 years, I'm still working, I'm still developing. And as long as you retain your humility and keep your feet on the ground, I think that's a good thing.
I like how you said that, because I do agree. And I think a lot of people will agree with you that you're never done learning. You're always going to learn. You're always going to evolve and grow. And, but I loved how you talked about when you started your meditations and you felt this loving presence. That's the energy. So like when I created this group or just having these interviews, it was about that connection that, to me, it's such a sacred connection when you first come together. And the way you described it, I got the goosebumps because that's exactly how I feel. Mm-hmm. And I want others to understand that it's a beautiful process. There's no fear in that.
No fear at all.
Yes. And
people said to me, are you ever frightened of connecting with spirit? Or I mean, the absolute opposite is the truth. It's true. I've never had one moment of fear. I've never had anything bad happen to me or anything like that. And it's the total opposite. It's absolute love. And when White Feather works through me now, I still feel that love when he's connecting, when he's linking with me, even in a public situation. And I mean, others would be in a better position than I to comment on this, but the energy of the room changes. The whole energy of the room changes. However bad the weather is, whatever's going on in the world, whatever's happening, the whole energy of the room seems to be transformed through this power of love. And it's a wonderful thing. You can't really put it into words, I don't think.
No, I mean, it sounds beautiful. And I've never actually been in the presence of this. Usually I'm observing, watching videos. So I can't imagine that. I mean, I can imagine how the energy will shift. I can just imagine that. You talked about how you started sitting for your development. Was this a long process for you? I mean, is it still continuing on?
Continuing. I actually sat in a development group. We used to meet every Friday for about 2 hours, 2.5 hours. The actual meditation would be an hour, and then we would give off any clairvoyance that we got after the hour's meditation. But I sat in that circle for, I would guess, 6.5, 7 years. I was asked to go on the platform after about 5.5 years. I remember the guy, the leader of the circle, asked me the one night. He said, "Bob," they used to call me Bob. "I'm going to put you on the platform," he said, "Bob." And I could have fallen through the floor. You know, I thought, no way. He said, "It won't be next week." He said, "It'll be in about 6 weeks' time." He said, "I'm going to be taking," this was the circle leader, Arthur, "I'm going to be taking the church service at the local spiritualist church." He said, "You can come on the platform with me." He said, "I'll do the opening prayer and you can do the address and the messages, and I'll do the closing prayer." And 6 weeks later, that's exactly what happened. And it went so well, Kathy, that afterwards he said, "You don't need me anymore." He said, "You're like a bird, you can fly the nest." And he said, "I'll start putting your name around." He said, you can take it on from there, which I did. And even to this day, I'm still demonstrating spiritualist churches throughout the UK, some in Europe, mainly in the UK. And it's just been a lifelong journey, or commitment, I suppose, but a labour of love.
A labor of love. And I like how you said that in the beginning. When you were younger, you knew that there was a purpose. You had a purpose, and it was just finding out that purpose. And you know what? You actually found that out very early on. Most people are still searching for their purpose, and you're living it, you're doing it, and this beautiful service to spirit. Everybody knows that I'm completely into the healing, and I absolutely love the philosophy that comes through, spiritual truths with guides coming forward.
Yeah.
When you first were in your development and before White Feather, when did White Feather start to appear for you?
Okay, I suppose after about 12 months of sitting in the development group, he came more to the forefront. But I'm glad you've asked me that question, Kathy, because I want to make a very important point. He didn't reveal his identity to me until 3 or 4 years later, even though he'd been using me, working through me. And the tendency I feel with a lot of people these days is, as soon as they start to develop trance, and I've experienced this myself talking to people, they want to know who the guide is. Well, who's my guide? What's their name? What's her name? What's his name? What do they look like? And they start focusing very much on this identity of who the guide or guides might be. And it's important that people don't do that, because when you start making a point of attention and focus on a particular identity, then in a way you're putting a block up. Guides have reasons why they don't tell you their name or reveal their identity, and it's because they want to bring through the information, not necessarily want anything from themselves. They don't want any fame or notoriety. When they're ready, they will step forward and reveal themselves. You've just got to be patient. And I always say this to people: don't worry about the name of the guide, who they are. Just concentrate on the development, on getting the link and getting the information through, and they will tell you in their own time. And I think that's I've always adhered to that. And White Feather actually revealed himself to me one night on my own, not in the circle. I was sitting meditating at home, and I saw this headdress, a full Indian headdress, and he just stepped forward in my mind's eye and he said, "White Feather, my name's White Feather." Wow. And that was verified, which is the other important thing. You have to, I feel it's important to have it verified by another medium. And that's happened on 1 or 2 occasions over the years. It's funny, Kathy, people come up to me sometimes after a demonstration, and bless them, with all the best intent, and they'll say, you had Julius Caesar up there with you. or you had, whoever. And I'm thinking, without being rude, I'm always polite to people. Oh, right, yeah. And I'm thinking, no, I didn't have Julius Caesar. I didn't have whoever, I know who the guides are. And I don't need someone to say, you've got this famous person with you. Guides aren't interested in fame. They haven't got an ego to pander to, So it's important, I think, to get that across to people, particularly in the early days.
And I have heard that from some of the people that I've interviewed, that most of the time when they start to have the awareness of who their guide is, it's either validated or confirmed by another person.
That's
and
right.
And it was very important that they mentioned the same thing as you, is it's not important to get that name, and just wait. And if they want to reveal it, it will come.
Yeah.
So I think that's beautiful. I love how, you have this image come through, and I am White Feather, or my name is White Feather. Oh, so amazing. I love the work that you do. The information, the truths, the teachings that come through White Feather, it's very broad. There's so many different questions are asked. And I do have one of your books, and it's not something that I would read so fast. It's something that you have, for myself,
dip into it
there and absorb it. It'll make me think about things deeper. And I think the one book that I have at the moment is In Presence of White Feather. It's amazing to me. Again, I love this stuff, so I could be lost in it for days. But, I was thinking, should I be able to read this book before our interview? I'm like, no, I can't, because I have to take my time with it. It's just beautiful information.
And the thing is as well, Kathy, how a lot of the books, the White Feather books, are based on question and answer sessions. And it's interesting how the questions have changed over the years. And I think that the general level of awareness, spiritual awareness of people that come to our trance meetings has developed. I know White Feather himself said, you've probably heard of the saying, cometh the hour, cometh the man. Well, he would never say that about himself, and I'm not suggesting that. But what I am saying is that when man's awareness, spiritual awareness develops, then that attracts the right type of information and the right guides from spirit to bring that information through. Now, you've probably heard of a guide called Silver Birch, who is revered, particularly in the UK, as being the pinnacle, if you like, of all spirit guides over the years. And certainly, I've read Silver Birch books, and they are beautiful, so much wisdom and truth. But Silver Birch, as far as I know, didn't speak about some of the things that White Feather speaks about now. Because at that time, when he was working through Maurice Barbanel, there wasn't the understanding in the general community of things like quantum physics and, and things like that. So there was no need for the guide to speak of them. But as we've evolved as a race, and as we've become more aware, certainly with the internet and social media, there's more information out there. So spirit have responded to that. And the guides have responded. And White Feather speaks about things now that Silver Birch could not or would not speak about. And that's how it should be.
And I like that. I like how it's, evolved. And I think we always limit ourselves by the questions we don't ask. When I was reading some of your, some of the stuff in the book, I'm like, wow, where does all the questions come from? You got to sit there and really think about these questions, because, again, you can limit yourself. So you got to be really broad in that. It's amazing the questions that are asked now. And you're right. I do think that Silver Birch wouldn't bring through, certain terms that everybody knows now, okay. God, I'm just trying to think of all the ones we could probably talk about. I just know that they couldn't bring it back then. And I think that is really interesting how you're bringing forward this information now.
That's right. And we always say, Kathy, as well, when we do a public demonstration, we always say to people, because we used to ask people to write down questions. Mm-hmm. And the one occasion, White Feather said, we don't want you to do this. he said to my wife, who he calls Sunflower, as you're probably aware, he said, Sunflower, we don't want questions written down because we have to have the voice. And it also means that it's very much in the moment. That people will ask questions. They may come without a question in their mind. And we usually find that once the trance is progressing and White Feather's speaking and answered a few questions, then people, the whole thing kicks off and people will start asking questions that they didn't even know they were capable of asking. And that's wonderful. That's how it should be. And it can go in any particular direction because the guide never polices any question at all. I've never known him fail to answer any question ever in 40 odd years. And it's never policed. Wherever it goes, it goes. And he's answered the most complex questions and the most simple questions from the most educated people and from the most uneducated people. And he treats them all with the same love. He speaks to them all the same. He would speak to royalty as he would speak to a pauper. That's how he is. But that's the beauty of it. It's mediumship itself is very much, it can't be rehearsed. It's always in the moment. That's why the likes of you and I get nervous. It's a nervous energy. Before I'm doing a demonstration, I'm like pacing up and down and I'm like a coiled spring. And my wife will say, sit down. I say, I can't sit down. I've got all this energy. As soon as it starts, it's totally different. That's the way it is.
I've read different spiritual teachings or kind of been looking around and looking at different mediums bringing forward, trance mediums bringing forward information. I've noticed that, or when people are starting to develop, the information they start to talk about or they start speaking, I feel like there's a kind of a radar where you'll know when it's really the guide because you will feel it, like how you talked about this love, this energy that comes, and the information and the way their language, the things that they say, it's higher than, the content is more than what the medium is used to saying.
That's right.
And it's more loving. I mean, it's incredibly loving. And then I have heard or read or watched other mediums come through, and I will question it because I'm like, wait, this sounds not very loving, very of the ego, and
absolutely.
So I do think that's very interesting.
It's important, Kathy, while you've touched on that point, and I very often bring this up in the preamble talk we give before we do a demonstration, is that, and I'm not criticizing anyone here, but there are what I call pseudo mediums, pseudo trance. It's not really trance, it's self-delusion. And you have to watch for that and be able to be discerning enough to see the difference. It'll be particularly noticeable if they are engaging in face contortions or speaking pidgin English or any other number of things which are a giveaway. And particularly if the guide's asked a question and they either can't answer it or they give a less than, respectable answer or have to go away and think about it. Well, White Feather, the answer's always there immediately. In fact, I say I'm not really there, but there's an awareness of the answer being formulated sometimes before the question's been asked. That's how quick it is. So we always say to people, you have to watch out for this pseudo trance thing, because any spirit guide worth their salt should be able to answer the question immediately. They shouldn't have to go away and think about it. So I'm glad you raised that point.
When you start to when you're connecting, and is there a part of you as you're going into trance and White Feather stepping forward, are you completely there? Where do you go? And how does that feel for you?
I wish I knew where I went. I often joke about this in the preamble again. I say, look, I'm not there. And people have said, where do you go? And I haven't got the faintest idea. I mean, some mediums might say they go to the halls of learning or to some beautiful place in spirit. I have no idea. I'm not asleep. There's an awareness there. There's a consciousness there, but it's not mine. It's as though I've been completely, well, it is. It's controlled and overshadowed. It's a willing surrender on my behalf. But it's difficult to give you anything that comes close to it, really, other than when you perhaps are, we do enter into altered states naturally ourselves during the day. And sometimes you can be in a euphoric state or an unhappy state or an optimistic state, and you don't recognize when that shift happened. It's like when you go to sleep, you don't recognize that shift. One moment you're awake, and the next minute you seem to be asleep. But there's an intermediate state between waking and sleeping that you have no control over. You may be aware that you're getting drowsy or you're going somewhere, but it just happens. And it's the same with the trance. White Feather will use my hands, like I'm using my hands now. He will use my hands. He will use my ears. He will use my mouth, my voice. He doesn't use my eyes. My eyes are shut. I can't open my eyes. And he doesn't use the bottom half of my body. He doesn't use my legs or my feet. He doesn't waste energy. So where I go, I don't know. I just know that I've gone somewhere and I come back, and I can sometimes remember some of it, bits of it, because I know that was going to be the next question.
Yes.
I sometimes remember bits of it, but not all of it. And then Amanda will say to me on the way home, White Feather said this, this question was asked, or the guy at the back asked that question. And, oh, yeah, I sort of remember that, or I don't remember that at all. Little bits, like a dream, really. You have snippets, don't you, of a dream when you wake up. And you can't quite put the whole thing together. That's what it's like for me.
Wow. And you know what's weird, because this always happens with me, is I have a list of questions and I'm like, okay, wait a minute. He's just answered 4 already. And so now I've got to figure out where I'm at, because Spirit knows exactly what I'm going to ask next. I do have an interesting question here. In observing different altered states, if you can remember in your beginning, were you ever shown, or did you have that sense of observing what was happening to you, jumping from different altered states? Did you jump from one and then back to the other and say, wait, I mean, I don't even know if I'm expressing this correctly, but that
I wouldn't say jumping. I mean, I know that like we all, as I said earlier, we all experience different levels of consciousness, even throughout the day, in a normal sense, I mean, just to tell you, a few years ago, I trained and qualified as a hypnotherapist. Mm-hmm. Now, this has nothing to do with my work as a medium, but I learned a lot when I was doing that course about how we shift our state during the day. When we're reading a book, reading a newspaper, watching TV, we're absorbed in that state, often to the exclusion of other things, and our awareness, our focus comes down, it narrows. This is why somebody can walk into the room, talk to you, call your name out, you don't even hear them, because you're locked into that state. So there's 1,000,001. It's like a spectrum. It's like a sliding rule. You go up and down the spectrum during the day. And the same can happen with your spiritual development. Some evenings I've done trance things with White Feather, and I know I've been so deep. And I can tell afterward, it's like I've been in a really deep, not sleep, but you know what I mean? I know I've been deep. At other times, it's not quite as deep. Perhaps I wasn't as physically well, or I was more tired, or whatever things affected. So you can't say, yeah, I'm at that level and then I'm going to go to that level or whatever. It is what it is, It is what it is. They will use you. White Feather always says, give us the instruments and we'll do the work. And you try and be as good an instrument as you can. And if you're finely tuned and you've eaten right and you've slept and your body's in a a reasonably healthy condition, then they can use you, I think, a lot more easily, a lot better than if you're tired or if you're not well. And, you know, that sometimes it's a bit of a struggle. But I will just say, just quickly on that point, I've had times when I've gone to do a trance, you know, public demonstration, and I've felt unwell, nothing to do with the spiritual work. I've maybe got a cough or a bad throat or a cold or even the flu or something like that. People have paid for tickets, and I'm thinking, you know, how am I going to get through this? How am I going to get through this? I asked Spirit for help, as you've probably heard that many times, and they lift it off me. They've taken it off me. Even to my own surprise, they've taken it off me. I don't know why I should be surprised, but I never take anything for granted. They've lifted it off me. I've done the demo without a single cough or splutter, and then as soon as they come back, in fact, White Feather, only 2 months ago, we did a demonstration at Leamington in the UK, and he commented on this because I really wasn't well that night, and the whole evening went perfectly. And as he was taking his leave, he said to me, I'm going to give the medium his cough back now. And as soon as I came out of trance, I coughed and coughed and coughed, and people were laughing, and I thought, why are they laughing at me?
Oh my goodness. And that was going to be my second question is, did you start coughing after you were done?
Yeah. Oh. So, you know, it's they can't, you know, healing's a wonderful thing, as you know, but sometimes there's a reason why you've got a cough or a flu or whatever, and they can't always take it off you permanently. They'll take it off you a while, but they give it you back. It's like, you know, you can have it back. It's yours. We don't want it. It's yours.
We don't want it. Oh my goodness. When you come out of trance, is it easy for you? Do you just like that, you're back to being just you, or does it take you some time to come out of this?
3, 2, 1, and back in the room. Yeah.
Wow.
No, I'm only joking. It's not like that. It's not like that. No, I come back. No, I don't come back. Very slowly. Usually, you know, my wife's there with a glass of water, and I'm sort of opening my eyes and I'm looking around, and there's a glass of water. I have a glass of water, and usually within a couple of minutes I'm okay. Although my sugar levels go down, and I have to have a chocolate biscuit. It's compulsory. We joke about this, you know, it's become a joke, but I say, look, I've got to have some sugar just to get the sugar levels back up. But yeah, it's usually a slow process over about 3 or 4 minutes.
Wow. Okay. So that's actually still pretty fast, though, actually.
Yeah, and it is the same going down, actually. You know, as I've developed more, I can go down quicker. I suppose it's like anything, you know, the more you do it, the easier it becomes. And the more that they can use you, they know what buttons to press. They know what, you know, doors to close and doors to open in the subconscious, and they can take me down quite quickly now, fortunately. Yeah.
How long in the beginning, when you first started sitting for trance and then blending with your guide and connecting to your guide, how long would it take for you to go into trance and have White Feather speak through you?
Yeah, much longer. I would say 15, 20 minutes. As long as that. But obviously in a public situation, you can't take that long, because people will be falling asleep, you know, they'll lose interest. And I think it's a natural aspect of development anyway, that it should quicken up. It's like, I guess it's like anything, Kathy. It's like riding a bike, like walking, like swimming, you know. When you first do it, it's hard work, and you have to get your balance, don't you? But after a while, it becomes second nature to you, and it's a lot quicker. The whole thing speeds up, really, fortunately.
You mentioned that White Feather doesn't use your lower body. So your eyes are closed, your hands are moving. Would he be able to? Would you be able to walk around and talk and have him talk?
Yeah, he has done. I mean, when I've done, I don't know if you're familiar with the format of spiritualist services in the UK, but usually the medium will give a talk, demonstration, a talk, philosophy, and then they'll give clairvoyance. Well, when I've done that kind of service, I usually stand up and give the address, and I still work in trance then. It's not quite as deep as when I'm doing a proper full-on trance evening with questions and answers, but even then I stand up You know, when I'm doing a normal church service, a Sunday evening divine service, I will stand up to talk. So he can use my legs as well, if he has to. Another thing it's worth mentioning as well, just to demonstrate the control, I'll just say this quickly to you. The one evening, this is going back quite a number of years now, we were doing a demonstration in a home circle, and he was speaking through me, and he said to the other circle members, one of them, he said, "Can you get a pin or a needle? Can you get a pin?" And he said, "I want to show you something." And he said to this lady who was on my left, "I want you to push this pin into the medium's hand."
Wow.
Now, I would say to anybody that's listening to this, don't try this at home. But she pushed the pin to the top of my hand there, and he said, "Push it further, push it harder."
Oh my
And
God.
she pushed this in, and there was no blood at all, and I didn't feel any pain at all. And he said to her, "Take it out," and he showed everybody my hand, and there was nothing. So it was just, he's only done that once, but it was just demonstrating his control over me. And I think that's really borderline physical mediumship, you know, because I'm classed as a mental mediumship, which is what trance is. But I do get a lot of physical phenomena happening. Well, not a lot, but I get some physical phenomena even now happening around me in the house. And this was one of the things that I think he was demonstrating, how he could control certain parts of my body.
Oh my goodness. Yeah, that, and once you told me that, I'm already, you know, doing this because I can just imagine that. Oh my goodness. So the physical phenomena that might have been happening around you, what would that be?
So much, even now. I mean, even in the last week or so, we regularly get objects moved in the house. But I suppose the most amazing, well, not from my point, not that I'm amazing or anything like that, but the most amazing thing that happened to us was several years ago, my wife lost her father after a long battle with cancer. And he was an atheist, didn't believe in anything, life after death. And my wife said to him on his deathbed, really, she said, "Dad, let me know you're okay. You know, come back, let us know you're okay." I don't know whether he heard it or not. He was sort of out of it, really. 3 days after he died, I came home from work the one evening. My wife was there, and I said to her, "Amanda," I said, there's a message on the answer phone. Have you played it?" She said, "I haven't played it." So I picked it up, and it was his voice. 3 days after he died, very quiet, but it was his voice, undoubtedly his voice. And he said 3 words, and I passed the phone over to her, and I said, "You've got to listen to this. It's your dad." And she just cried, and we played it over and over and over and over again, and we actually recorded it. I've still got it somewhere on the computer. And I said, "I've got to find out how he did. Where was that call made from? It must have been made from your mother's house." So we dialed 1471, which is the callback number in the UK. The call was made from my mobile phone at the exact time, because it always leaves a time, doesn't it, on a message that's left on an answer phone. It was made at, like, say, 12:05 in the middle of the day, and it was a time that I was actually driving. So there was no cheating or anything on my behalf. Not that I would ever do that anyway, but it was proof to my wife. It was a time that I was driving. I didn't hear the phone. My phone, I think, was switched off. I didn't hear it being used or anything. So I think it was his way of letting us know that he was okay, and yeah, you know, there is something in this afterlife business. You know, I'm sorry I doubted you, sort of thing. And for him to do that through my energies, if you like, and I don't take any credit for that, because my wife's mediumistic as well, so he was probably drawing on both of our energies. But for him to do that 3 days after he passed was a massive thing.
Yes.
You know?
Yes.
So that was a wonderful aspect of physical evidence, physical mediumship, because he must have used our energies, our physical or our spiritual energies to make that phenomena happen. You know, it's I suppose it's classed under EVP phenomenon, but you've got to have the right energies to do that. But the other thing is the number of times we have things moved as warnings, and we know that they've been moved paranormally. Mm-hmm. You know, things that couldn't have been moved any other way. They've been actually dematerialized and rematerialized. And they normally happen 3 or 4 days before something's happening, like a family member's ill or something happens. It's like a warning, if you like, you know. And we say, yeah, you know, we know that around, but they just use the energy. If the energy, I mean, all mediums, you've got energy, I've got energy, all people have got energy. Mediums have got an abundance of energy, a certain kind of energy that spirit can use, and they can channel that into physical phenomena when they need to.
That is amazing. I mean, I can't imagine having that a message on a phone. I know a lot of people that have experienced phone messages or a missed call, and it's from their loved one who's obviously on the other side, and you're like, how is this happening? But it's beautiful to have those messages, those signs that come in like that.
It is beautiful, yeah.
It is.
I don't think we're privileged, because I know a lot of people get these kind of things, you know, but I think it's wonderful that spirit can work in that way.
I do. I wanted to talk about you. Okay, so one of the things that you do have out, and it's a beautiful thing, you share your brief guide to trance development from White Feather. And this is something, I mean, can you talk about this? Because I really believe, and like the reason why I'm doing all these interviews is, to me, it will help somebody. You know, it's really going to help other people. Yeah. And you have this guide out. When I first found that guide, I was like, oh my God, I love this. And so can you tell a little bit about this?
Well, yeah, I mean, I'd heard so many, you know, misrepresentations of trance mediumship and development. And I mean, people these days want everything on a plate, and they want it to happen immediately. You know, they sit for a couple of weeks in a circle, or somebody tells them they should work on their platform, and suddenly, you know, they're this developed trance medium, and they're speaking all this nonsense out, you know. And I thought, well, you know, I've got to sort of clarify things, because trance mediumship is a passion. It is a labour of love. It is a discipline, if you like, and you've got to have this discipline and this desire, and you can't develop quickly. You cannot develop quickly. It's got to be a process over a period of time. And I thought, well, if I could just sort of put a few of the pointers across, because I was very fortunate to sit in a circle that was an excellent, beautifully run circle. The guy that ran it, Arthur Phelps, was a disciplinarian. He wouldn't stand any nonsense. He would tell you, you know, even if he upset you, he would tell you the way it is. And if you didn't like it, then you could either take it on board or you could leave. But he taught me so much, and Spirit have taught me so much. I thought, I'm going to try and put this into a concise guide. And that's actually a chapter. It's the last chapter in the book, In the Presence of White Feather, which I extracted as a PDF that people can download from the website free of charge. And it's about, what is it, about 8 or 10 pages, 12 pages?
Yeah, like 12, 13 pages.
Yeah, with a few illustrations, just about the different levels. I call the levels, I mean, you touched upon levels before, and you know, where you are, do you jump from this level to that level? I've always thought of trance as being like a river, and you go, you know, you can, like I said earlier, it's like a spectrum, but it's like a river, and you can be anywhere on that river of trance. And just because at one particular time you're at a certain point, it doesn't mean that you're going to hold that. You may go back to something lighter, which could be anything from overshadowing, inspiration, a moment of bliss, to anything from that to deep trance and even physical. It's all a spectrum, and I've tried to put that across in the article. Also about different brainwave states. But what I would say, you know, is it's a pointer. That article's a pointer. You know, we can be all intellectual about things, can't we? You know, we very often are these days. Everything has to be a course, or you know, you have to get a degree, or you have to get a certificate. And mediumship isn't about that, in my opinion. That's why I've never wanted to get a qualification. I've worked at the Arthur Findlay College, I've worked for the SNU, but I've never taken the courses, because I don't believe that getting a qualification is any real guarantee of the quality of your mediumship. I know it sort of points towards a certain standard and a certain level, but mediumship is it's not an intellectual thing. It's not something that can be actually learned intellectually. You can only give pointers, and that's what that article's about. Just pointers towards development, things to take on board, sensible things like discipline, sitting regularly at the same time in the same place, opening with a prayer, perhaps raising your thoughts, not doing anything silly, you know, like messing with Ouija boards or anything like that, you know, common sense things, really. I've always had this common sense approach, and I've tried to encapsulate that really in the article.
Yeah, no, I love it. I mean, you know that I think I usually tag you every time I share it, but I share it quite a bit, just because it has beautiful information on there in development.
Yeah, yeah.
I think it's very important, and I'm so grateful that you offered that as a free, you know, a free to everybody that was lucky enough to find it. So that's why I continue to share it. I do want to ask you a question. When a guide comes to you, I wanted to talk about how that would feel, what somebody would experience when their guide comes in, or spirit control comes in to work with you. Could you tell us a little bit about what somebody might expect?
Yeah, I mean, in the early days, you would get, or I certainly experienced, and I know a lot of other people have had the same things, physical things like your heart rate may alter. You may feel a pressure here. You may feel like there's a tight band around your head. You may feel that you can't move your head. You can't move your hands. You may feel as though your head's on back to front, like you're looking at the back of your head. You may feel somebody looking at you, eyes looking at you really close, even though your eyes are shut. It's like there's eyes looking at you. You may feel cobwebs on your face. All of these things are signs of development. You may feel a tightness in your solar plexus area because there's energy being drawn from that. You may feel a constriction in your throat, almost like you're choking or your throat's dry. And people get very concerned about these, get very wound up about these. And I've always said to people, these are natural things. Don't focus on them. Don't get fazed by it. Don't concentrate. Just acknowledge them. If it gets too much, like if your throat's tight, ask spirit just to take it away, or just ease off a bit. Talk to your guides, even if you don't know the names. Talk to your helpers, and they will listen to you. And the interesting thing, Kathy, is that as you develop, all these feelings that you were having, they disappear, to the extent that it's like anything. When a guide first starts to use you, you know, they're getting to know how to work with you, and it's like wobbling all over the place with a bike. And when they get to know, then it's easy, and the symptoms, if I can call them that, are less pronounced. Whitefeather came up once with a beautiful analogy. He said, when I touch a medium, he said, when I touch their auric field, it's like an upturned jelly on a plate. You think of an upturned jelly on a plate. When you touch it, it wobbles. He said it shakes like that. And when I enter into your energy field, he said it's doing this. He said, I have to get to know how to enter very, very gently, very precisely. And if you imagine that jelly, that upturned jelly, and in the center of that jelly is a little pea or a matchstick, or anything you want, and you've got to touch that matchstick or that pea without disturbing the jelly. That's what the guide is doing when he comes into your energy field. And that's why when they first do it, it's like, whoa, what's going on? You've got all these feelings, you know, all these things going on. As you develop, it gets easier and you don't notice them. And people say, oh, they're not working with me now. I don't get those feelings. They don't realize that they've actually developed. They've actually moved on in their own development, and they're not noticing those feelings. They're not as pronounced because it's so much easier for the guide to work through them.
I like how you describe that, because as you're describing it, I can imagine my own experiences. I'm like, hey, yes, it is coming in strong. And yes, that might be this. But I'm glad how you mentioned that it will subside because they've already worked through that part.
That's right. Absolutely. That's right.
Water. But yeah, it absolutely makes sense.
Yeah.
And for people to understand that, and I like how you said that, you know, they're not working with me anymore, but they actually are. You just went beyond that already. You
remember, Kathy, the first time that you, I don't know if you've ever done any public speaking, but the first time you stood up in front of an audience, I know it terrified me, and I never wanted to speak in public. But it's now something that's so easy to me, and I don't really, I still get nervous, but as I say, I don't worry about it anywhere near the extent that I would have done years ago, because I know that that the links are there, the information is going to come, and even if I stand up there on the platform with a blank mind, I know that Spirit will fill it with whatever they want, and it'll be right. You know, when you in the early days, you're just so consumed with worry about it that it can block. You know, and it's the same with development. It's the same thing. You focus on these feelings in your throat, and your heart rate and your blood pressure's gone up, and your head's. You focus on all these things, and there's no need to just acknowledge them. Just let Spirit get on with it. They know what they're doing. If it gets too much, just ask them to ease off, and they know what they're doing. I like how you said that. I like that. I'm going to pause this for 1 second. Okay. Really quick. Making sure I hit the right button. Pause. Okay, so I had to actually pause, guys. I'm sorry, but I'm kind of getting over a cold, so I didn't want to start having a hacking cough in the middle of Robert talking. So again, I'm very sorry about that. So I wanted to, I love what you were saying, that I think we do think too much in our heads about how we are viewed or how we work going up on platform. So I'm making sure that we've covered a lot of information already, but I definitely do want to continue talking about your work that you do with White Feather, because the information is beautiful. It's just, I mean, you're always going to hear me say it's so beautiful, because the spiritual truths, the teachings that come through, you touch on so many different things. And I, for one, love it because it makes me think. It makes me look at, things that I'm working through. Or even a worldview. You bring a lot about that up. Yeah. A little bit about the teachings that come through. Yeah, I mean, White Feather speaks on a broad spectrum, really, of topics. In the early days, he used to speak a lot about reincarnation and karma and things like that, which he still touches upon. But I've noticed a gradual shift, I guess, as I said earlier, with the fact that people's awareness generally in the world has shifted, and people, I think, some people, not all people, but some people are more aware of things like quantum physics, other dimensions, the electromagnetic spectrum, the anomalies of time, things like that, and they're more interested in things like that now. White Feather can speak very scientifically if he's called upon to do so. And I've known him answer questions from quantum physicists and doctors and people like that quite adequately. And he can also speak on very, very personal terms, in terms of, people's fears, anxieties, worries about things in life. He will speak about the current situation in the world, and and how we can change the world and change our reality. And he's come through recently with a lot of information about the nature of reality, or the illusion of reality, if you like, and even things like about the universe being a holographic in nature, and how we create our reality by our thoughts. And he talks about the collective consciousness, how together we can influence what we experience in life, and he puts a great emphasis on that. And he always couches it in terms that people can understand. He's always said to me, if it goes over people's heads, if it sails over their heads, it's wasted. And he always seems to have an ability to pitch it to the audience that's before him. He always pitches it just right. And you never quite know what he's going to talk about or how it's going to go in terms of the information, whether it's going to be more scientific or more sort of person-centered, but whichever one he chooses, and often he'll sort of move between one and the other, it always seems to work out just right. And, you know, I've had people come up to me afterwards and they've said, you know, I didn't know whether to come tonight because, you know, you mentioned the word philosophy, and it's boring. Philosophy, you know, it's like religion, you know, it's boring, and, you know, I don't want that. I want a message, or I want something more exciting. And at the end of the evening, they're absolutely astonished that it's held their attention. You know, we can do an hour and a half of trance, and people say, well, you know, I wanted it to go on further. I wanted it to carry on because it was so interesting. And philosophy doesn't have to be boring. It's exciting. It's exciting because you're hearing information that you wouldn't necessarily ever hear on the mainstream media, because they're all, you know, mainstream science. And, you know, I mean, to give you an example, Whitefellow speaks a lot about consciousness being the creator of matter, if you like, not the other way around, not that matter came first and consciousness sort of somehow magically developed, and when the body dies, when the brain dies, the consciousness is gone. No, it's the other way around. It's consciousness. And it, you know, in the strictest sense of the word, there is no matter. You know, it's just a term. It's all consciousness. And this just brings me on to a book that I wrote, which isn't a white feather book, but I know it was guided by spirit. I've written two books which aren't classified as white feather books. I'll emphasize that. But the first one was Transcognitive Spirituality, which I wrote a couple of years ago, and I was absolutely driven to write that book and to find the information to write that book. And it followed on 12 months later with the latest book, which is called Light, the Divine Intelligence. And I realised a great truth, and it's like when it dawned on me, it's like literally something had switched on in my mind, that everything is light. Everything is light, and light is consciousness. Consciousness is light. Everything is light. Even sound is light that is very slow. Everything is light. And, you know, people say, what are you talking about? Everything is light. When you do the research, when you look at what quantum physicists have written, and there's been some very intelligent people in that field, and when you join all the dots up, you realize, hey, yeah, this is true. And some quantum physicists have said the same thing, that everything is light in one form or another. And I wrote this book, and I published this book, and I had a little bit of interest with it. But the fascinating thing was that I came in touch with a lady. I saw her book on Amazon, and it said, the book was called It's All Light. The author's name is Gloria Prema, Prmea. And I thought, I've got to read this book. Now, this was after I'd done all my work on my book and published it, and I bought her book. And Kathy, I was absolutely gobsmacked that when I read her book, she'd come to the same conclusions that I had, exactly the same conclusions, that everything is light. And I think her book is superior in a lot of ways, in the fact that she's put it across so beautifully, and gone into areas that I wish I'd gone into. But generally, we were on the same lines, and I thought, yeah, I had to read that book. I was guided to that book, and it was like they were telling me, yeah, you're on the right lines here. What you've written, is true. And that for me was like a development, if you like, in my own spirituality, because it wasn't that I didn't need white feather anymore, or I'd gone beyond that. It wasn't that at all. I work as closely with white feather as I've ever done. It's just that you develop yourself as a person, as a spiritual person. When you work with spirit, you develop yourself, and you get your own abilities and gifts, if you like. White feather describes it as having wine poured from a bottle, and the aroma is still left in the vessel. The aroma of the wine is still left in the bottle. And I know from all my dealings with spirit that some of that beautiful energy is brushed off on me. And I'm not saying I'm any great philosopher or anything personally, but the fact that I've been able to do this research and was guided to this information about consciousness and about light, and to have it verified in that way was a great. I don't like to use the term journey, because everybody says, oh, I'm on a journey. It's a bit of a cliche, but it was really a journey over about 3 or 4 years for me. And I was very, very excited by it. And interestingly enough, white feather brings also similar information through now about consciousness and about light and about the connectivity of everything, the fact that we're all one, we're all connected, and what one does affects another. What happens in one area of the world affects another, and he talks about, to give you an example, at the moment we've got this crisis on, haven't we, with North Korea.
Oh, yes.
And we're all wondering what's going to happen, is there going to be a nuclear war? Are we going to destroy ourselves and whatever? And I know what white feather would say, you're not impotent in influencing that situation. You're not helpless. People say, what can I do about events, all or thousands of miles away? What can I do to influence Donald Trump or, the North Koreans or whatever? You can, because either everything's all connected. Either we're all one or we're not.
Yes.
If we are, then what we do in our lives, the way we think, what we aspire to, has to have an effect on the rest of it. So we're not powerless. And white feather, that's a mainstay of his teaching now. He brings that through a lot. There is no little me, Kathy. There's no little me. We're infinite consciousness, aren't we? We're infinite consciousness. What else do we need? Forget Brexit. I'm not interested in Brexit. I'm not interested in the football results. We're infinite consciousness. Don't let anybody, take that away from you. That's the message.
I love that you brought this up, because I was actually thinking about that earlier today. And I was like, pondering, Trump and all the stuff that's going on in the world, and thinking about if we were all connected. Yes, there's action, doing the action, being out there, doing whatever we can with our, physically talking and moving that energy that way. But can't we also do that with our thoughts, instead of going into, what is it? I'm hoping I'm describing this right. Thinking with everybody else, that's universal.
Yeah.
And sticking with the fear of what's happening, or versus, can we change that by aligning to a different energy, a different thought, and creating, pushing that positive energy out there, because we're all connected. I mean, am I making sense?
Right. Absolutely right. And those that sort of control, or seem to think they control world events, use fear as their main weapon. They like to keep people frightened. This is why you get all these terror attacks and, these big storms. Now, I won't start on that, because that's another area altogether. But they control events by stimulating and planting the seeds of fear. And when we buy into that, then we're feeding. It's like a loop. We're feeding we're feeding off the fear, and we're feeding the fear back into it. So it's perpetuating, self-perpetuating. And we have to break that cycle. And the only way we can do that is to recognize who and what we are. We are fearless. Our consciousness has no fear. Light has no fear. Consciousness has no fear. Whitefeather's often said, he puts it as a rhetorical question. I've heard this comes back to my mind now. He said this to people. Do you think the Great Spirit is ever frightened? Do you think infinite consciousness worries about, fearful things? Of course not. So why do you? And I want to just say this, Kathy, that we must make the distinction between our mind and our consciousness. And Whitefeather, very big on this. The mind creates fear. The mind creates anxiety. The mind worries. The mind, conceptualizes things. It's the mind, the consciousness, which is beyond the mind, which is what you truly are, what we all are, that has no fear. That has no worries at all. It's only when it comes, if you think of the mind as being like a lens through which the light of consciousness is focused, then that particular lens, whether it's your lens or my lens or Donald Trump's lens or anybody's lens, puts its own spin on it, puts its own color on it, and it focuses it. And it's seldom the whole story. It's only that particular individual's take on it. And when you throw into the mix fear and anxiety and worry and all this, and the mind tends to repeat things, it's repetitive. It's no wonder the world's in a mess, because we're living in the intellectual mind, and we have to go beyond that. We have to take a step back and be that which we truly are. And when we can do that, you've probably had, and I'm not just talking to you here, Kathy, I'm talking to anybody that's listened to this, you've probably had a moment in your life of bliss. You might have been walking down the street, as Whitefeather said, you might have been washing up, you might have been doing anything. Suddenly you feel so happy. You feel so happy. Everything's right, and you feel absolute overwhelming love and bliss. And then it goes, and your mind cuts back in, doesn't it? And you think, well, I've got to do the dishes, I've got to fill the car up with fuel, I've got to do this, I've got to go to work, and it's gone. But that moment of bliss, that little gap that you entered into, that's what you are. That is you. That's what you truly are. Beyond Kathy Beltran, beyond Robert Goodwin, beyond Donald Trump, these are just labels. We are infinite consciousness. And that is the main thrust of Spirit's teaching, I feel, at this moment in time. Not just Whitefeather, but a lot of teachers are bringing this through, and it's wonderful.
I love how you said that, because the moment you said, do you remember a blissful moment? I exactly remembered a blissful moment. I've often sometimes thought about, how did that come in? It was just out of the blue. I could just feel it. And
yeah.
Again, like you said, thoughts came back in and I got pulled to a different direction. But I know that state was complete love, just complete.
Total, yeah.
Yes.
Total love, total non-judgmental, just being. There's a great book called I Am That by, I can't remember the guy's name now. Mahajara, I can't pronounce it. It's an Indian guy anyway, Nisargadatta. Maharaj Nisargadatta. And it's got a black and yellow cover, and it says, I am that. And this guy is a wonderful teacher. It's quite a thick book. It's quite a famous book. It's been around for years. And his one sort of mantra, if you like, and I've heard Whitefeather say it and other teachers, is I am that. And what he means by that is I am everything. I am all past, present, future. That's what I am. There is no I really, because you're all one. We're all one. It's just that we get sucked into this little me with our little identity and our fears, and we believe it. We're like actors, aren't we, on the stage? We buy into it, we believe it. And that's what holds us back. And when we let all that go, it's the same working with spirit, it's the same working with trance. Just let it go, trust, and it will be. It will be. It will come through you.
Well, I'm definitely going to look up that book, okay? Because I've been writing every time you say something, like, okay, let me write that down. Let me write that down. I am so grateful. I love this conversation. I loved how we started talking about, consciousness. I love that area. So, but I do want to mention really quick to everybody, Robert Goodwin's website. It's whitefeather.org. He has a total of 8 books out right now. All can be purchased there, as well as Amazon UK.
Yeah, Amazon UK, and I think you can get them on Amazon.com in the States as well.
Perfect. Yeah. Also, check out his YouTube channel. He has lots of little clips here about the teachings. Absolutely check it all out. I am so grateful to you for coming on and taking the time and sharing your experience, your knowledge, your understanding of trance, and helping others on this path. I'm just so grateful. I mean, it's like the best day ever for me right now.
Kathy, you're very kind and you're very generous. And I take my hat off to you for your own dedication and your own service to spirit, because it's all service. As White Feather says, there's no high and low service. Just because someone works in the spotlight on the platform, or who's got a, they're famous or they've done this or that, doesn't mean they're any greater or lesser than the likes of yourself and you and I. We all do our part, and you're doing your part. So thank you for inviting me. Thank you for the privilege of talking to you, and for giving me your time. I've really enjoyed it, and I hope that, I know that some good will come out of this, and I hope that everybody that hears and watches this will get the same enjoyment that I have. So thank you.
Oh my goodness. Thank you again, Robert.
Thank you.
Okay, I'm gonna stop the recording and just hold on, okay?
Okay.
Okay, thank you again, you guys. You have a great day. Okay.
Pleasure.